Welcome to the Universalist. Welcome to the Universal Convocation Vespers this evening. We're going to start with the chalice lighting, followed by some announcements and opening words. We will share some joys and sorrows, after which Jay will deliver his message. We'll have the chalice extinguished, and then after that, open discussion. Let's see here. Are there any announcements that you want to make at this time? Jay?
Yes, I want to announce that next month, August the 6th, the first Wednesday of the month, our editor from the Universalist Herald will be giving us the presentation at our Vespers. And I think that'd be great. Universalist Herald's been around for a long time, and I think it deserves support. And my other announcement, this is farther off in the future, is we are planning for a physical in-person convocation in May in Newberry, South Carolina. Excuse me, details to follow to be posted on the Universalist Convocation website.
Richard?
If anyone has suggestions for topics for our Vespers or speakers, or is interested in being a speaker, please contact Universalist Convocation. If you go to universalistconvocation.org, there's a page labeled what, contact us or something. Yeah, and if you just make your suggestion there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements at this time? All right, let's proceed with the lighting of the chalice. We light this chalice to create among us a commonly shared experience. We light this chalice to mark the beginning of a time of fellowship. We come from many places and bring with us a variety of experiences unknown to those present this evening. The chalice lighting signifies the illumination of a path we will walk together, where we can share the gift of fellowship with one another. Jay will now share our opening words.
It may be said that people die twice. Once when the living spirit leaves the body, and again when their name is no longer spoken. This evening, we will celebrate a Universalist woman who, in the opening years of the last century, showed that the traditions and social customs need not define one's life. Our story today is about Reverend Athalia Lizzie Johnson Irwin. It's a story of individual determination and the uplifting power of universalism. Irwin was a female minister who thrived in the 1900s when men dominated the religious environment. Think of a contemporary analogy of Ginger Rogers, who did everything that Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in high heels. Tonight, we will also collectively expand our knowledge of Southern Universalist history. Unfortunately, in the world of Unitarian Universalist scholarship, Universalism is often overlooked. The little attention given to Universalism is often directed towards Northern Universalist history. Southern Universalist history, sadly, is rarely accorded more than a footnote. Helen, if you would lead us in joys and sorrows now.
Thank you. I would like to follow the example of Reverend Derek Parker, who at our June Vespers opened the floor to allow us to reflect on our joys, concerns, and notable moments and milestones in our lives. If you wish to share a joy or concern, please use the raise hand function to be recognized. If you're unable to use the raise hand function, just wave and we will recognize. I'd like to start by saying that Jay and I recently returned from a trip to Pennsylvania where we had a chance to meet our new granddaughter. She's 3 months old now. Any other joys or concerns that people want to share?
Doug, go ahead. Have to get off mute.
Congratulations on the new grandchild.
Thank you.
We never thought it would happen.
Well, it kind of along the same lines, but Mary Lou's twin brother, Peter Canarosi's birthday is this month. So she's going to send him congratulations. It's her twin brother's birthday.
I never thought there'd be such great joy in going, here, Mom.
Well, I guess it was a surprise to her father. A surprise to her mother too, but I guess her father was really surprised.
If that's it, Jay, do you want to start with your message?
I will. Thank you, Helen. I want to start by thanking everyone for coming tonight. My love is in resurrecting Universalist, especially Southern Universalist history, and this is a topic that caught my attention. And you'll see why as I go through this Vespers presentation this evening. We Unitarian Universalists may think we do not have many revered or famous historical figures. 5 U.S. presidents are considered Unitarian or Universalist: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy Adams, Millard Fillmore, and William Taft. Other names we recognize from their lifetime celebrity status include Ralph Waldo Emerson, Susan B. Anthony, and Clara Barton, the founder of the American Red Cross. Still others like Kurt Vonnegut, P.T. Barnum, and the Twilight Zone host Rod Serling may surprise us. However, if we narrow our search to only famous female Universalist ministers, the list of people quickly becomes smaller. We often see Olympia Brown cited as the first woman ordained by the Universalist Church in 1863, but that title might actually belong to Lydia Ann Jenkins, who was ordained by the Canadian Ontario Association 3 years earlier. There is less awareness of Phoebe Hannaford, who was ordained in 1868 as New England's first female minister. In my search, even using artificial intelligence engines to expand this list of notable female Universalist minister, the list is not significantly expanded. One name consistently overlooked is Athalia Lizzie Johnson Irwin. Well, today, I would like to set that record straight. Athalia Lizzie Johnson was born in Arkansas in 1862 into a family steeped in Southern heritage and guided by deeply rooted Baptist orthodoxy. I'm going to pause for a moment. Helen, you have some...
Yeah, I'm trying to, there we go. I'm sorry. There we go.
I think you got your desktop. Well, there you go. Great. Athalia Lizzie Johnson was born in Arkansas in 1862 into a family steeped in Southern heritage and guided by deeply rooted Baptist orthodoxy. Her father was ordained as a Baptist. Actually, his title is Evangelist of the Gospel Ministry. Her uncle, who lived with the family, was also a Baptist preacher, and her brother, Mason, would soon follow a similar path and become a Baptist minister. Athalia's father baptized his daughter by immersion when she was 22. 2 years later, she married George Irwin, The married couple then moved to Columbia, South Carolina. History might have completely overlooked Athalia if not for her friendship with the esteemed Universalist circuit writer, Reverend Quillen Shin, often referred to as the grasshopper missionary. Shin traveled widely in the South, establishing new Universalist societies. At one of these societies in Columbia, Athalia met Shin, an encounter that changed her life. Shin exposed her to Universalism, and at the age of 36, she withdrew her membership from the Baptist Church and dedicated her life to Universalism. Not one to sit on the sidelines, as I've explored her life, not one to sit on the sidelines. She wasted no time after her embrace of Universalism, serving as the secretary of the South Carolina State Convention of Universalists. And despite having no formal ministerial training other than being the daughter of a Baptist minister, Athalia began her ministry in 1901 when she served a short one-month ministry at the Universalist Church of the Redeemer in Americus, Georgia. A year later, she assumed the pastorate of the First Universalist Church in Pensacola, Florida, a church, not surprisingly, that was started by Shin himself. Despite her rather limited time in the pulpit, she was already lauded as one of the very best workers in the Universalist Church in the South, and a woman of rare talent and ability. The Pensacola Church ordained Reverend Irwin in 1902. She wrote a poem to commemorate her ordination that included these lines. "Oh, send me out to tell the nations of a love that bars no soul outside that heavenly home above." Reflective of her deep commitment to Universalism, these two lines from that poem are inscribed on her headstone. Reverend Irwin may not have been among the vanguard of the earliest female Universalist ministers, but she was a woman of first. She was the first native-born Southern female to be ordained as a Universalist minister. When she accepted the pastorate of the Universalist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, it was noted that she was the only female minister of any denomination in that city. In Little Rock, Reverend Irwin's life comes full circle and intersects with my Atlanta and Universalist history. In Little Rock, Irwin's footsteps trace those of her mentor, Reverend Shin, who established the city's Universalist Church as part of his missionary work. 8 years later, Irwin was the pastor of Shin's little church in Little Rock. There is a common thread linking Shin and Irwin. That common link is the Young People's Christian Union, or YPCU, an organization that played a significant role in the spread of Southern Universalism. The Young People's Christian Union, organized in 1889, was the Universalist youth group. And there was some redefinition of youth at that time because many of the members, especially its leadership, were well deep into their 30s. The YPCU's focus on missionary work brought it prominence and engendered strong loyalty among its members. At times, the independence of the YPCU brought it into direct conflict with the National General Convention of Universalists. When the YPCU focused on Atlanta, where I have my home congregations, when the YPC focused on Atlanta in 1895, Shin led that missionary effort. Little Rock was another missionary focus of the Young People's Christian Union. Excuse me. During Irwin's pastorate, with the $6,000 grant from the YPCU, the Little Rock Society moved from its rental space in the old Congregational Church and built its own building called the Cottage Chapel. Funny thing about this new building, When the weather got cold soon after it was constructed, its stove was not big enough, and so everyone had to hustle back to the Congregational church until a new stove could be installed in the cottage chapel to keep people warm during the cold months. Irwin remained connected to the Young People's Christian Union, frequently attending its annual convention, providing updates on the youth group's missionary work. In Little Rock, Reverend Irwin's career blossomed. She was portrayed as a gifted writer and orator. The local newspapers frequently commented on her sermons with titles such as The Idea of Future Punishment and The Hope of Immortality. However, she garnered the most press coverage when she challenged her Baptist minister brother, Mason, to a debate at her cottage chapel. The 5-day debate was an argument for and against the doctrine of universalism. Debate topics included Universalist and Orthodox belief in Christ, the Bible we accept, the Christ we would follow, the punishment we expect, and salvation. Irwin's energetically rejected the doctrine of the Trinity, quote, as unreasonable and as something which Christ never meant to imply. She emphasized God's love and that God, quote, wills that not any should perish, but that all should come to a knowledge of the truth as it is in Christ Jesus. Well, after the rumble in Little Rock, the Detroit press declared that Irwin had carried the day. Her brother entered the debate believing that Universalism had led his sister astray. He might still have held that belief at the debate's conclusion, but he shared with the Detroit press, it, meaning universalism, universalism isn't so bad after all. Irwin also needed to defend her ministry from those who declared that a woman should not preach but should remain silent. In her 1907 sermon, St. Paul and Women in the Ministry, Irwin refuted Paul's admonishments in his letter to Timothy, where he stated, I suffer not a woman to teach, not to usurp authority over a man, but to be in silence. Irwin noted the hypocrisy of the current ministers, ignoring Paul's others' teaching, such as, of all things, shunning of widows. Yet these same ministers still insisted on the legitimacy of Paul's prohibition of women in the pulpit. Another sermon, which I really enjoyed, A Woman's Place in the World, brought her additional notoriety. A woman's place in the world. In that sermon, she said, a woman's place in the world of today is any place and every place she can and wants to fill, from legislative halls and courtrooms to the parlor and kitchen, from the counting rooms and council chambers to laboratory and studio, from the schoolroom and university to college matron and chambermaid, from the plow handles and the cotton fields, and if she will, to the pulpit and the press. This, I say, is the place, in my opinion, of a woman in the world today. Although not an active suffragette, the authors of a 2022 book, Stateswomen, A Centennial History of Arkansas's Women Legislators, referenced Irwin, not a woman, in the suffrage era. Well, after several years in the pulpit in Georgia, Florida, and Arkansas, Irwin left active parish ministry to pursue 3 years of ministerial study at the St. Lawrence Theological School in Canton, New York. Unfortunately, Our time is limited, so I must summarize the last years of her life. After graduating, Irwin accepted the pastorate of All Souls Universalists in Riverside, California. This pastorate, however, ended in 2 years when she resigned for health reasons in 1915. She died of typhoid that same year at the age 53 in her home in California. I want to conclude my story on Athalia Lizzie Johnson Irwin with a few more observations. I've not yet mentioned that Irwin was also the editor of the Universalist Herald magazine. The Herald, still published today, is the oldest continuously published liberal religious periodical in North America. The current editor, as I shared earlier, David D'Amico, will deliver our August Vespers service. My wife, Helen Borland, is a proofreader for the Herald. While in Little Rock, Irwin published a short-lived newspaper called the Arkansas Pilot, dedicated to correcting public misconceptions about Universalism. Also in Little Rock, she published her book of poems, A Bouquet of Flowers, with the proceeds funding church projects. Her small booklet of poems was dedicated to Reverend Shen. Now, Athalia did not do this alone. She had the support of her husband, George, who was really something of a Renaissance man himself. Besides his work in the clothing and painting industry, he participated in amateur theater productions, earning him the title of captain that followed him throughout his life. At a time when women follow their husbands, George followed his wife as they traveled across the country. He passed away 2 years after his wife's death. Hopefully, the next time you are asked to name famous female Universalist ministers, Athalia Lizzie Johnson Irwin will be mentioned for her service to Universalism and for her modeling the life of a fully liberated woman. May it be so. Helen, I'm going to ask you to help us extinguish the chalice.
Okay, our words for extinguishing the chalice. As we extinguish our chalice, let us leave this Vespers with a renewed sense of how we have done our part to bring Reverend Irwin back from the recesses of forgotten history. We have spoken her name and given tribute to the power of Universalism to shape a truly remarkable life. The Vespers has ended. We will now have a time for discussion and comments. And this session has been recorded. And if you do not want to be recorded, please let us know and we will pause the recording while you speak.
Yeah, when you begin to speak, if you don't want to be recorded, if you're recorded, you'll wind up on YouTube. If you don't want to be recorded, just say at the beginning, please pause the recording, and I will do so. And while you're speaking, you will not be recorded. Where is her gravestone?
Her gravestone is in, I forget the name of the cemetery, Elwood Cemetery, I think it is, in Columbia, South Carolina. And in a twist of how things work here, when she died, cremated, and remained sent back to be buried in Columbia, her grave is right near the gravestone of Reverend D.B. Clayton, another half-generation minister ahead of her, a Southern minister of great renown in both the pre- and post-Civil War era. In fact, her time in Columbia was actually spent in services that Reverend D.B. Clayton preached. So who could have imagined this full circle coming of activities with her and a fellow South Carolinian?
And our convocation next year is at the Clayton Memorial Church in Newberry, South Carolina. That's D.B.
Yeah,
Clayton.
yeah, everyone, this is all set up, folks.
Yeah. Mhm. D.B. Clayton would conduct lengthy, sometimes multi-day debates with other ministers
Yes.
who were challenging the validity of universalism. They would, at some point in the evening, they would stop debating, but resume the debate the next day, and sometimes it would go on for several days.
Well, I often wonder who gets to declare a victory. So in one of his, of course, Reverend Clayton always declared victory was found. So one time I decided to track down the obituary of one of his vanquished ministers. And in his obituary, I think it was a Baptist minister, had declared that he indeed had vanquished the Venerable D.B. Clayton in a debate. So,
yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question of curiosity. How did people find out about our Vesper service? Can anyone share what was their motivation, or how did they find out?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Mark.
Doug?
Hey,
Oh,
I
Mark.
just read it in the Universalist Herald.
And Doug,
Doug?
I found out about, I think I got an email from Richard Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Although I get the Universalist Herald, and somehow I missed the part about the Vespers. I'll have to look back at my old issues.
Mm-hmm. Louisa has her hand
Well,
up.
the newest issue has the announcement for the Vesper service on the back cover.
Yeah.
Yes, my church announced it and told us where to find it.
Oh, great.
Recommended. We have it in our weekly news.
What church is that?
Oh, it's the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Orlando, Florida.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Wesley has his hand up too.
Well, the link simply arrived that time. It just popped up, and I said, "Oh, well, I'm interested in that."
Well, I'll share this article about Reverend Irwin as part of a larger project I've been ongoing. In fact, our convocation in May of next year will have a focus on what was the origins of Universalism in the South, which is different than it was in the North. There was some connection with Reverend Hosea Ballou, some connection with Reverend Elhanan Winchester, but it was really self-generated. So this all got me started. So how did this all begin? And I started doing research. I realized that there was very little scholarship put together on Southern Universalism. And going back to D.B. Clayton, since we mentioned it before, when all these AI tools came out that were going to transform the world and change everything and be smarter than everyone else on the planet Earth, I decided, well, hey, I asked ChatGPT to, as an historian, a Universalist historian, to write a biography of the Reverend Daniel Bragg Clayton. And it did not hesitate. It spit out 5, 6, 8 paragraphs with great eloquence, proper grammar, but absolutely nothing was correct.
Hmm.
So at ChatGPT, it just keeps on, well, this looks right, and bam, it comes out. So here's the giggle in my life. After I spend, this is sometimes months researching, and then uploading it to Wikipedia. Now, when you ask ChatGPT or Copilot or something like that, give me a biography on the Reverend D.B. Clayton, it's absolutely perfect. I love it. It's great stuff. It's everything I wrote.
Yeah.
So I have discovered I am the intelligence in artificial intelligence. So there you have it.
Noam Chomsky said AI is really plagiarism software.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah. Justin has his hand up,
Go ahead, Justin.
but unmute yourself.
You're on mute, Justin.
Yeah. You're right, so right about Universalist history. I'll say one thing, that at least when our history is discussed, the Christian origins are not hidden. Now, when Unitarian history, I'll back up a little bit. Some years ago, I offered classes in Unitarian Universalist, in Universalist history, but I got some material from 25 Beacon Street, and part of it was about the Unitarian Church. Well, Unitarians, the history that the UUA churned out, covered up the Christian origins of Unitarianism. And the fact is, the word Unitarian is meaningless if you don't. Yes. I'm looking, Unitarian Yearbook.
Yeah, and in the front there is the logo of the American Unitarian Association. This was their logo until merger. And there's a Greek phrase there, aletheia in Christo, which means truth in Christ.
Well,
But
yes.
they tried to conceal it with the Greek language.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm glad, Jay, that you're bringing Southern history, Southern Universalist history to light, because Southern history has also not been a priority, certainly. So thank you.
Wesley, you're up.
Okay, the Church of the Larger Fellowship, I think, did a better job of this because George Marshall graduated from Crane, and I had I had a lot of Universalist history. One of the interesting things is that in Southern Universalist history, the one thing I know about is Joseph Priestley. And Priestley, and who had an influence on Jefferson, was a Universalist. He was a Unitarian and a Universalist, which I find interesting. Now, I haven't completely gone into all of it, although I have some of the original documents from it, but I find it interesting that Priestley was both. And that when Priestley arrived, there was a Universalist church waiting, and he asked to use it, which they allowed him to do. So I think it was in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. So Priestley's, the Universalists were here ahead of time, and of course, he's about as far back as many of the people go with this. So I just think it's interesting because, of course, too, he has relevance to Southern Universalism through Mr. Jefferson, however problematic Mr. Jefferson's attitudes toward slavery might have been. So I just think it's interesting.
So what I wanted to add about studying Southern Universalist history is also the study of the Southern United States, which, if you had not caught it in the recent issues of the newspaper, experienced a major war back in the 1860s. Completely overturned its economic foundation, and also its relationship to what was basically 4 million enslaved Black Africans And the Southern Universalists were okay with slavery. This was a real loggerhead problem between Northern Universalists that really began emerging, butting heads in the 1840s. Of course, by the 1850s, they were just miles apart, never to be reconciled on that. So I think it's a study that needs to be done on what I've always asked the question, because many of these Southern Universalists were farmers, and as farming economy, they had slaves. And I have not yet really figured out, even though I've tried with some research, how does one go to the slave market in the morning and buy a person and come back later on for an evening service at the church? Still is an interesting conflict to be figured out.
Well,
Go
how
ahead.
did Jesus do it? You know what I mean? He took slavery for granted. It was just, something like 25% of the people in the Roman Empire were enslaved, and he'd never said one word about it.
Hmm. Hmm. A true Southerner.
I think
Well, Jack,
that
I'm
about
glad you got.
wraps it up. Yeah.
Well, I want to say, Jack, I am glad you got it in. I saw your request for the URL just at the last moment, so I'm really happy that you made it in. Wesley, you're back on. And then Helen, you want to wrap it up after Wesley?
Yes.
Priestley apparently was not in favor of slavery, but I don't know at what point in his life. See, I have these little biographies, but apparently he was quite against slavery. And I don't know. He and Jefferson used to come and listen to him. So I don't know what they talked about. Although Jefferson was in favor of abolishing it in the at first he wanted to put it in the Declaration of Independence, and they said, no, you're going to upset the apple cart. And he had a problem because he was not as wealthy as Washington, and his daughter's husband got into terrible problems, which has something to do with his relationship to freeing slaves. Although I don't know as much about him as I know about some other people, like Adams, who he used to argue with, and after they reconciled. But as soon as it was possible, as soon as it was possible in the Constitution, Jefferson went down and put an end to the importation of slaves. He said he was going to do it, and he did.
Well, Wesley, that's a good note to find a period in for this. So, Helen, before we leave, I want to make sure that our convocation planning team did receive the email with our 1 p.m. meeting tomorrow. So we'll follow up from there. But Helen, I'll give it to you to close the session.
Yeah.
Out.
Is it 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock?
I sent it out for 1 because I was mistaken. I will resend it for 2 o'clock.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. We can wrap it up here and hope to see everybody next month.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. It's nice seeing you again online.
Yeah, it's nice seeing you when you weren't freezing all the